Hello friends, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Sofia Goyal and today we are going to discuss a very important topic in JavaScript, which is promises. You might be thinking now, I always keep saying every topic is very important, but initially I'm trying to cover the topics which are actually very important and which are a very big part of JavaScript. For promises, sometimes I think like if promises were not there, what would have happened? Like how would I have handled all the APIs calls and everything? And most of the application in today's worlds are handling these kind of APIs and giving are working on the basis of some sort of response, like all the REST APIs are there, or when we talk about the mean stack, the merge stack, the full stack and everything. So these work on this thing only, like getting data from the APIs and then producing some response and put it in front end in front of you, right? So yeah, so these things are pretty important and they are used mostly everywhere, so it is also very important for you to know about this kind of stuff. And before starting, I would like to tell you like what I'm going to cover for promises. Not necessarily in this video, because that will become a very big video, but you can consider this as a promise mini series, which will be a part of again JavaScript interview questions and answers. And I'm going to tell you like what topics I'm going to cover throughout this promise mini series, which we can say, although I'm not going to create a playlist for this. Okay, so I'm going to cover what are promises, then different states of promises, then need of promises, like what is the need, then what is callback hell, and how did we handle asynchronous calls before promises. So like what was the way of handling them, what were the problems that we faced, and what is this callback hell that is so much associated with promises. Next is how to produce a promise. Okay, I'll tell about this later also. And how to consume a promise with dot then or async await, which you might have heard. Difference between then and async and await. Difference between fetch and axios, and important function related to promises like promise.all, promise.raise, and many more. And practical interview questions related to promises. So this is what I have mentioned in my JavaScript interview question series also, like all of these things I have mentioned there. And secondly, I think this is almost everything which is asked in the interviews and which is like super important for us regarding promises. So I'll try to cover everything and I'll try to explain everything in depth. So let's begin from the first question itself, and it is, what is a promise? So promise is an object that represents an eventual completion of an asynchronous task. Now this completion could be successful or it could be a failure. Like when you got a response, that is successful. When you got an error, that is failure. Simple. So you can consider like a promise is something like promising in real life, where this promise object is promising us that whenever you give me an API, I will call it and then I will give you something. That could be a response or that could be an error. So you can consider it like a real life promise, that I promise to do something. Maybe you will do that, or maybe you will forget that, or you will not do it, right? So this is a promise. I hope you understood about it. Now we talk about the states of promises, because these things are minor things and they are quite important. So promise has three states. One is the pending state. So until and unless the API call is done and we are not getting anything, that is the pending state. The promise is pending. The next is the fulfilled state. So fulfilled is whenever you get some response from that promise, like some data or something, whatever you desire, then the promise is fulfilled or it is completed. And the other thing is rejected. Maybe you get some error or some issue with that. So in that case, the promise is rejected. Now what happens with promises is either we consume the promise or we produce the promise. What I have told in the initial steps, what I'm going to explain to you is, what is producing a promise? Producing a promise is like creating a promise that you try to create by yourself. Fine. And consuming a promise. What is consuming a promise? Is like, whenever there is an API call, so that is a promise created by someone which you are trying to consume with the help of fetch is first producing the promise, and then we are trying to consume it. Fine. So that is something created by someone else and we are trying to consume it. In 90% of the scenarios, we try to consume the promise like which is already created. We try to take data from that, but we will also cover here too how to produce a promise, and I think that will be pretty interesting for you. So we will come on that later on, like how we are producing and consuming the promises. But right now I would also like to focus on what is the need of promises, like why promises are required, and have you ever thought about it, how it was handled before promises, how asynchronous calls were handled before promises. So the answer is promises were created to avoid callback hell. Okay, now these are the two things, please be clear about it. What is the use of promise? The use of promise is to handle asynchronous data, but that asynchronous data can also be handled in other methods which were used previously. So why promises were introduced to overcome that? Because they were creating a callback hell and we did not want that. That would be very confusing for us. Hence promises were introduced. Okay, so don't be confused while answering these questions in the interviews. Fine. Now the question comes, what is a callback hell? What the hell is a callback hell? Okay, so callback hell is when we are doing one callback inside another callback inside another callback, something like that. If we are writing a set timeout function, okay, then this function that we are passing in this is a callback function. Fine, and this is the timestamp, for example. Okay, so this is the callback function. This arrow function is the callback function that is passed inside it. Now if you call another set timeout inside it, and then you again pass a callback function inside that set timeout, fine, and I'm again passing this 1000 seconds, this timestamp here, right? Now again I'm trying to create again a set timeout inside it. Fine, it's not necessarily to be a set timeout or something like that. It could be anything, but I'm just trying to explain you what is happening. So this is one callback, then there is a callback inside that callback, then there is a callback inside that callback. So this is what a callback hell, when there are multiple callbacks, one inside the another, and maybe it goes on further, then this is a callback hell. Because in this it is very difficult to predict or to assume what will be the outcome finally. Okay, now you might be thinking like what I have to do with these set timeouts, and how callback hell was there for asynchronous tasks earlier. So we are going to understand this with the example of a code or a sort of an application. I'll try to tell you one practical scenario. For example, if I have to get the data of a country from an API, fine. So in that case, you can check on the screen also like how it is going to be done or what I'm thinking. For example, you have a card in which you need to get the data of a country, fine, which has its flag and then the population and 2-3 details about it. And then maybe you want to find the neighbors of that country. So in front of that big card, you are putting some small cards of the neighbors of the country, which are again containing the flags and the data. Okay, so think like you have an API to get the data of a particular country, and from that you are fetching the neighbors also. Then you are going to fetch the data of those neighbor countries, and then you are going to put it in your front end. Fine, so this is the scenario. Just don't think about callback hell or anything, just try to understand the scenario. What is the scenario, what we are going to do. Fine. So let me show you the API which we are going to use for this purpose. Fine, so this is the REST countries API which I am going to use. Okay, so here you can check, see, this is the URL which is going Okay, so this is the URL which is going to give me the data as per the country name. Okay, so if, for example, if I'm going to call this API with the country name Portugal, fine, so this is going to provide me data in somewhat this format, okay, in a JSON format, and I'm going to get the name, the official name, and some other details which could, like, capital is there, or population or other stuff could be there. But what I need to find out as the neighbors is coming with the name as, sorry, with the name as borders. Okay, so the borders is this, Spain is the border here. Fine, so I can create a card of Portugal, and then I will check the borders here which is inside Spain. And then now Spain is present in the form of code. So if you see this API, we can also get the data with the code. Okay, so if I am going to call this with the Spain, okay, then you can see again I'm getting the data and I can fetch it from there. So I hope you understood the link. So I think you have got an idea like what is happening or what we are going to find out. So now let's dive into the code to check out how it was handled earlier. Fine. So I have already created some sample code and some function, because these XML HTTP requests were used to manipulate the asynchronous data and to get response from that. But since I've not used it much, so I have created some wireframe syntax here, because that will be difficult for me to remember it completely. Okay, so first of all, I'll explain you. To create a request, we have to first of all create an instance of this new XML HTTP request. Now we are opening the request, and since it is a GET request, because we are requesting to get a data from the API, and this is the URL. Since we wanted to get the data of Portugal, so this is the URL, and then we are sending the request. Okay, after sending the request, we are adding an event listener which will be checking everything while loading the request. And then we are getting the data, like in the response text, we are getting the data, and we are putting it in this data constant. So we are basically destructuring, if you know TypeScript, in the data object. Okay, so now if I check what is coming inside this data object, fine. So if I check it here on my live server, yeah, here it is. Okay, so here is the data. Okay, so this is, if you remember what we saw there, fine, this is what we saw here, name, common, official, and this is somewhat similar to what we are getting here. Okay, and here is something that we are getting the borders, fine, as ESP. Okay, I hope you are understanding. Now if I have to find, let me put this, comment it out. If you want to get the neighbor, I'm again putting it in the neighbor variable, and this we can get by data.borders. Okay, if I try to check console.log neighbor and I save it, so the neighbor is ESP. Fine, now let's create another request. Okay, so in the same way, I'm going to create another request, const request. Now I'm creating it again as a constant, so I think this will not be an issue to call it a request again. Fine, now request dot open, and again this is the same thing, get, right, but this URL will be changed. Okay, I am going to put it in ES6 format, because I need to put this neighbor variable as a in here. Okay, so if I take it from here and I can replace it with the neighbor. Fine, I hope you are getting what we are doing. Now we are going to send the request. Fine, now we are going to again do the add event listener, and on load we are going to use a function again. Okay, and I'm going to name it data2 is equal to JSON dot parse this dot response text. Okay, now let's check this out, console.log, data 2. Fine. Let's check what is coming. Okay, yeah. So these borders are changed, and the ES, this is Kingdom of Spain, alternate spellings are there. Okay, so yeah, we are Madrid, we are getting the capital. So yes, we are getting the data of Spain now. Okay, fine. Now when we want to print the data, we can just use this data too, and we can pass it to our HTML elements, and we can put it there on those cards. Fine. So I hope you understood what we try to do here. Now have you seen the callback hell that is created in this add event listener? This is the callback function which was called first time. Okay, now to get the data of the neighbors, there was another callback function, like again there was an event listener, and again there was a callback function. There could be more data, more event listeners, and more callback functions could have been there. So this is how a callback hell is created, and if such kind of callback hells are created, then it becomes very difficult to predict the outcome. If that goes to 4 or 5 layers, then it is very difficult to predict the output, like what is going to happen next. Fine. So to avoid this problem, promises were created. Now how to handle these things with promises, that I'm going to tell you later. First, we are going to discuss about the producing the promises and consuming the promises. Like how do we produce a promise and how do we consume a promise? Because I think first you need to know this, then only we can handle this thing with the help of promises. Fine. So let's see a very simple code of producing a promise. Okay, producing a promise is very simple, so don't think it as a big deal. Okay, we are creating, suppose const promise1 is equal to new promise. Okay, we are going to create a new instance of the promise object. Okay, now this has a callback function. This callback function has two parameters. Okay, resolve and reject. So resolve is going to take like what will be returned when the promise is fulfilled. So I am going to put resolve, and I am going to pass, for example, promise resolved. Okay, and reject is going to take the response which is going to be there when promise is rejected. Promise is rejected. Simple. Okay, this is the simplest promise that you can create. Now promise1.then. Okay, now then again has a callback function which has the response that is received from the resolve. Okay, function data. See, somewhere I write the ES6 and somewhere I write this function. Don't mind it, you can write in whatever way you want. And I'm trying to find console.log data. Okay, now what happened is this promise has a resolve which is going to provide us what we get after the promise is resolved, and by default after the promise1.then, it is going to take the data from this resolve, which is going to be passed as an argument in this callback function, and we can just directly use it. So this is the simplest form of promise that we can create, right? And I can also show you a catch function. Suppose I'm going to give it the name as error, and I can print as console.log error. Now what happens here is, since the promise is resolved, so catch will not be executed. Okay, if I comment this, because the promise is not resolved, only we have the error, hence the error is printed and then is bypassed. So this is the simplest form of promise that we can do. Fine. Maybe in a more practical way, I can also pass an object here. Fine, like name Sofia and city is Noida. So this is like a kind of a real API response which we get after resolving the promise. So I hope like you understand how we are producing a promise. This is basically producing a promise. We are producing a promise in this way, and by using these then and catch, we are basically consuming the promises. Okay, so I hope like this producing and consuming, you have got an understanding of how this is happening. Still, if you are confused about anything, please go back in the video and try to just play it 1 or 2 times again, and then I hope you will understand like what is happening exactly. Okay, so now we have got the basics clear on the promises. Now let's dive into the code again and check out how we handled the previous API responses with promises and how it has become easier for us. Okay. So now, one more thing is there. For the normal APIs, we use fetch. Okay, so fetch is something that is, you can say, inbuilt with JavaScript, although it is a web API. I hope you have understood it in my event loop video. So from fetch, we get a promise and then we try to consume it from there. Okay, so let's see. Function, let me write the name as get data by then. Okay, simple. Now let me put the fetch with the first this. Okay, this is by default getting it. So first I'm getting the data. Fine. Now I am using then to consume it, and here I am getting it, for example, as response. But the data that we get from fetch, we have to convert it to, like we have to stringify it with .json first, because directly we cannot access it, otherwise it will be coming to us as a promise again. And now then we can just access the data in the simpler JSON format. Okay, so data, and I can show you like console.log data. Okay, let's comment this code out. Okay, let's comment this call out. Oh, this will not be called there at least. Okay, and get data by there is called. So let's see what the response is now. And here we have seen that we have got it in the form of an array consisting of an object. Fine. And everything is same that we got in the last response, if you remember it. And we have got the border as ASP also. Okay, but remember we are getting the data in an array. Okay, so this data is in array. Fine. So now if I see normally, I can make border is equal to data 0. Okay, dot border is again an array, so borders okay, console.log border. Fine. So we have got Ismain as the border. Fine. Now what I'm going to do is again, so now I'm going to put a fetch here with sorry, I've just copied the border with this request, right? I need to put the ES6 index here. Okay, and I'm going to pass border instead of neighbor. Okay, but I need to return this fetch from here because I need to put another then later on to get the data. So I think you have understood the pattern now. This is again producing a promise, then maybe I'm getting the response to 5, and this response to will be returning response to dot JSON. Okay, we also don't need these brackets. You can remove it from the first response also. Okay, and then finally we are going to get the data 2, and this will be producing console.log data 2. Okay, so yeah, I don't know why this require is coming, sorry. Yeah, okay. So yeah, see, borders are these, capital is Madrid. So again we have got the Spain data. Okay, so now can you see the difference? I did not comment this code because I wanted you to guys to see like what is the difference. See this long code and this callback hell, and this is a much simpler code in which you can understand what exactly is happening. Fine. Now, apart from then, a very famous method of handling the promises is using async and await. Okay, so let's try to check the data or check the handling of promises with async and await as well. So function get data by async. Let me keep it short. Fine. Yeah. This will be a asynchronous function, because for an asynchronous function we need to define the async in front of the function to mention like this is an asynchronous function. Now const response is equal to, we have to await for the fetch. Okay, and this is what we are getting. Yeah, I think I've missed this, sorry. Yeah, okay, so this is what we are doing. Now if we want to get the data, again we have to do await, okay, response dot json. Now if you check the data, console dot log data. Fine. Don't be confused guys, I have already commented the call of these previous functions, so these will not be executed, only this will be executed when I call it. Fine. So let's check it out again. I'm showing you the same data, but that is with a different method, so I hope you can understand. Don't get bored. Fine. Yeah, so this is the data, we are getting it right. Okay, everything is same. Fine. Now again, to get the border, I'm just going to put it here because this is the same thing. Fine. Now like the previous one, response 2 is equal to this. I'm going to copy this completely, command C, await this. Okay, and then const data 2 is equal to await response 2 dot json and console dot log response 2. So if you sorry, we have to console dot log data 2, not response 2. Okay, sorry. Yeah, this is why this is not refreshing. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay, you got it now. That was not refreshing, I don't know what was the reason. So yeah, we have got the same borders, the same capital. So yeah, these are basically the three methods by which we are going to handle the promises. If you see, this is the much complex one, this is a comparatively complex one, and this is the simplest method, and this is the reason that people prefer async and await most of the time, because this is very simple to handle. Okay guys, there is one more thing that I wanted to tell you, is that with async, basically an asynchronous function or a async function is a promise in itself. Fine. So with an asynchronous function, we can produce a promise also, and then when you try to consume it, you will get the data. If you want me to show it to you, I can show this to you as well. Okay, let me, like if I am writing async function abc, and I'm going to write console.log abc. Fine. Now if I try to console this function, So here you can check the response. This is basically a promise. Okay, async function ABC, this is a promise. Okay, so I hope you got it now. Okay friends, so that's it about today's video. I think most of the basic concept of the promises are clear to you. I have tried to explain everything, all the methods that are used to handle promises and how we create them, how we use them. So this is, like mostly the basic part with the history and the use of promises. And if you find this video helpful, and if you think that this can help your friends, or if you like it, please press the like button and share it with your friends. Please subscribe the channel, and please tell me in the comment section that what you have learned or what more I can improve and what other videos I can create. Almost 2 videos are lined up that I have already told in the beginning of this video, that what are going to be there, and what I'm going to explain further with respect to promises. But if there is anything else that you are looking forward, please let me know in the comment section. Till then, please subscribe the channel and see you in the next video. Bye bye.